Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. I invite you to bring to mind someone who makes you smile every time you think of them. Someone who makes you feel lighthearted. Someone who is kind and wise and generous in spirit, always willing to share their wisdom. That's how I would begin to describe today's guest. I'm joined today by Sara Harris, a retired psychotherapist and former elementary school teacher. Sara is also the co-founder of EarthWays, where guides trained in wilderness rites of passage conduct programs out on the land to help people reconnect with the earth and themselves. Here's what we cover: what rites of passage are and why they're so important; two key experiences that shape the second half of Sara's life; what it's like to embark on a wilderness quest; and how listeners can better connect with nature in their daily lives. Sara was gracious enough to allow me to include her email address in the show notes should you want to reach out to her for more insight on any of the topics we discuss. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy this lovely and uplifting conversation. Sara, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kathy. It's great to be here with you.
So please share a bit about your background with our audience.
Well, I live in Northern California and part-time also in Southern Oregon. I was a teacher for about 8 years, and then I was a psychotherapist in private practice for 35 years. I've been retired now for a bit. And I think what was really significant was when I was 50, I went on my first vision quest, and that really shifted both the focus of my work and my life. And then when I was 54, I had surprise open heart surgery, and that also shifted the focus of my work and my life. And then these two kind of also braided together. So currently I only do, I'm on the board of VeteranRites, which is a rites of passage program for rites of return for male and female veterans to take them out on vision quests. And I also am part of EarthWays, LLC, which is a nature-based program I started 20 years ago. And we do day-long programs and circles and lots of different things to restore our relationship with the natural world is our mission.
Mm-hmm.
So that keeps me busy enough, along with my new dog, Daisy.
Ah.
So.
If I had to pick a theme, it's a wonderful phrase, this idea of rites of passage. And I think about the life experiences that you've already shared with us, and then how you've chosen to, your word, braid them together. I think that's a beautiful visual, but there's a real transformational quality and an intentionality in how you've navigated this second part of your life. And so before we get into the details, what are rites of passage and why are they important?
Rites of passage are kind of an organized, intentional ways that cultures have of helping the youth become adults, of helping adults go through significant life stages, of having of children, of marrying, divorcing, partnering, starting something new. Any significant life passage can have an intention set to it so that the community witnesses it. An intention is set around it. You might go through some kind of an ordeal and separate from the way of life you had before to step over the threshold into something new. And then you are also witnessed in most cultures, by a council of elders who verify and hear your story. And all of those steps make all the things we go through in life much more conscious, much more supported, rather than feeling like you're just freaking out going through this all by yourself. And people are much more apt to come out of a rite of passage with a certain gift that they've learned or earned through the ordeal they've been through, that then not only becomes their personal gift, but it becomes part of what they share with their community. Mm. So, and basically, really all cultures who all were originally earth-based all had rites of passage to help the children separate from the mother, to become the adult, all those stages. So we kind of lost our way in our country, in our culture, in modern Western culture. And the rites of passage kind of they never went away. Everybody's always marked them, but they got often marked in kind of profane ways that didn't really serve the soul or the growth, i.e., getting drunk. When you turn 21, you go get drunk. That's a rite of passage.
Indeed, it was.
Yeah. What does it really, does it really serve a movement forward?
Indeed, it did not.
So, or getting your driver's license, those things are significant markers, but they've been a bit stripped down, shall we say. They don't really carry the beauty, really, of a rite of passage with them. I remember when one of my nieces, who was kind of learning about some of this stuff from me, but I was kind of the weird old aunt who did this kind of weird stuff. And when she graduated from high school, she wanted me to do that stuff. She wanted me to do something, but she didn't know what she wanted me to do. So around the dinner table after, the night of her graduation of the family, I put a big heart-shaped rock in the middle of the table. And she got very embarrassed. She said, Sarah had this idea and she's going to do this thing. So then I said, yeah, we're going to pass this rock around. And I just said it very lightly. And everybody, when you take it, just give Kate either a blessing or a piece of good luck or a wish or something. Well, the family just sits there for a minute, like, oh my God, what are we going to have to do? Fortunately, my brother, bless him, reached right out, the head of and took it and said something very beautiful to her. So it went around, and even her younger brother, who was like 13 at the time, gets the rock in his hand, and he said, something like, I think you'll do really good, Kate. But basically what we did is that was a little tiny mini ceremony where we just stopped for a moment and said something personal and real and kind of blessed her and then put it back in the middle. And it changes the dynamic. It changes the shape. Now, many families do this in many ways, but that's just one little example of not making a big deal out of it, mm-hmm. and yet honoring.
I just love that, because sometimes we think we're not doing it right, or it needs to have certain elements. And you're getting to the heart and the spirit of what was going on.
Right.
And how we wanted to send her off. I think it's a really beautiful story. And I'm also the weird old aunt. At least I'll be prepared now, should that request ever come my way.
Yeah. Yeah. Or one of my nephews wanted me to marry them because he said, about that threshold thing. And so sure enough, when they came up to me to get married, I had put a line of flowers that they had to step across, and then they had to they jumped back over it. So, there's so many things like that are woven into cultures that we're just not very aware of, or they've lost their importance, but people want to do them anyway.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I'm sure many, many years from now, that's what they'll remember. They'll remember stepping over that line of flowers, and she'll remember when she turned 21 and everybody had something nice to say to her. So that's really beautiful.
It can be so simple, and because it's in our bones. People do it all the time. But for these big life passages, sometimes people feel like they don't know what to do, or they wish they could offer more, or they wish they could have some people support them with something. Because it's also a way of seeing people, and that has never gone out of style. Everyone needs to be seen and witnessed. We all do. So if your friend's going through a divorce and a couple of you just get together, for instance, and, maybe create a circle that she comes in and sits down, tells the whole story, and you sit and listen for a while, and then maybe give her a certain something to drink and something to eat, and have her state her intention about the new life she wants. Mirror that back, and you all bless her on that in some way, encourage her. right there, it's like then the community lends energy. And I think that's why rites of passage were so important, because the community couldn't live if people didn't succeed in getting through these passages and continue to grow up and mature and become initiated adults. How would the children get fed, if people didn't take their place in the culture? So I think that's why they've been returning more and more, because they're elemental, they're archetypal. The need for them has never gone away, no matter what the era or culture, where in the world, doesn't go away. Everybody has the need to be seen and witnessed and to know not only that they have a gift, but that the culture needs their gift. And that there are people who see that and will reflect that back to them.
Yeah. And I think it takes on even more importance, because for as much connectivity as there is with our devices and our electronics, that we're finding more and more people are lonely and feeling isolated. And so the impact of really being seen and witnessed, it feels like this work is more important now than ever.
That's what we feel. And even when we do like a day long, which is not a whole rite of passage, we'll do a day long where people gather together in a circle, state their intention for the day. Then we send them out over a threshold to be alone on the land for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And many people say, I would never go out alone in nature if it wasn't for this. And they come back, we welcome them back in, have a little snack. They fast when they're out there. They don't talk to anybody else. They can journal. It's not a hike. It's to just wander, just to be. You might hike, but it's not going out for your fitness walk. It's going out for a different purpose. It's like a little bit more ceremonial. And then when you come back, you have maybe 10 minutes just to talk about what happened out there. And then we as the guides just mirror back what we heard. Who taught, what animals spoke to you out there? What was the experience? And our job is to weave it back and reflect back your own story back to you. So it takes one day. So you could do it in half a day with a friend. I've done it in half a day with a friend. But that thing of coming back and speaking and having someone hear you and wandering out in nature and being silent and alone, and yet you're safe and held and somebody knows where you are and is expecting you back. When I do that, I feel like I've had a vacation. It's just a matter of hours. And so people sign up for these because it's so hard to make the time to go out for a day or a half a day to just be quiet in nature. All the to-dos come in. So that's a thing where we've taken from the larger rites of passage and we've taken the universal elements and condensed them into just even a small day event where you have an intention, you separate from your regular life. You're not taking, emails that day. We even encourage people to leave their phone in the car. You cross over a threshold of some sort. Could be a stick you step over. Could be the way 2 trees come together. You step under it. And in that, you're in different time. You're now like in different time. Then you're out alone in the underworld, kind of just seeing what presents itself, what happens. And then there's the return. And the return is you come back over the threshold. You're welcomed back. See, here's even the mini village, right? You're welcomed back. Tell us what happened out there. And then the next step begins, which is incorporation, which is taking on in the body, taking on in your life, whatever you got out there. And sometimes you don't even know. Might just be you go back into your day a little calmer. Now, for a huge vision quest, which is maybe a 3 or 4 day solo, we say the incorporation, taking back into your life, takes up to a year.
Wow.
Because it's a long time to understand and to incorporate and to begin the new life. So these stages people are hungry for, these ways of marking time that are move from the sacred to the profane, the busy time into stillness or to quiet nature time.
Mm-hmm. What's really resonating with me is how much of this sometimes can just happen naturally. What I noticed last year and definitely this year is no headphones, no phone. I do my workouts in the morning and I go out in the afternoon And there is one secret place that's not too far from where I live. It's like a little secret cove and a little path around a lake. And over the last year or so, I've made connections with the wildlife there. And I was playing hide and seek with a heron for the longest time. It's like,
Oh,
we would find all these different things, but I go into these walks with, I wonder. And that's it, just an open hand. I wonder. And sometimes, as you say, something happens and sometimes it doesn't. But I never made the connection that this is really what I'm doing. And the way that this can be enhanced is how might I be able to do this with somebody else, whether we agree in separate places and then we'll come back and share. And I just love that. I love this idea because it creates conversation that comes from a very different place than if you just were to sit down and have a chat with somebody.
It really does. In fact, so often when you go out walking with somebody, I find that I'm not very aware of the natural world. I'm all in the conversation.
Right.
So when you go out with this, I wonder, and you have, playing hide and seek with a heron, and you're present to the world, you're present to the natural world in a way that creates so much space inside.
Yeah.
And is so reconnecting. And if you and a friend went and you just don't even, you go different paths, I've done this with a friend, you just meet up back of the car and you both take a minute, and it's not like, oh, how was your walk? Not like chatty, but it was like, so tell me, and you just take a minute and say, wow, this heron. And the other person might actually have an observation about that. Like, well, that, something might intuitively come, and maybe not. Sometimes it's just to be heard, but it's kind of a sacred space together rather than just chatting, that being heard. And with a vision quest, when you've been out for 4 days and 4 nights alone, there's no way you could tell the whole experience, nor should you. You just trust what comes to be shared. And the guide mirrors that back. And often I don't even remember what they said, but I remember how I felt at being seen.
Mm-hmm.
The words maybe don't stay, but the experience of being seen is what stays. You just grow bigger when you've been seen. You just grow bigger.
Yeah. You mentioned something when you introduced yourself that there were, at 50, you went on a vision quest. At 54, you had an experience and it really changed the direction of your life. What about those experiences would you like to share with us? And beyond the experiences themselves, how it really changed the trajectory of your life?
The vision quest was so powerful. I had never been alone for 4 days and 4 nights out in nature without seeing another person. It was so huge that I realized what began to come when I came back is that I wanted more. As a therapist, of course, I was watching the process. And I realized that one vision quest felt like it was worth about 2 or 3 years worth of therapy, frankly. And that's coming from somebody who had given their life's work to therapy. So I'm not being critical. It just felt like it was so intimate and so confrontive and yet so safely and beautifully held that the experiences that I had out there, I could trust. There was no intermediary. There was no interpretation. There was no psychologizing. It was just me and the juniper trees or the earth or wherever I was going through whatever I went through and coming out the other side. And I'm not going to romanticize it and say it was all great visions and stuff. I'd get really bored. like you don't take books or anything. And I'm a reader, right? I'd sit there reading the ingredients on the toothpaste. I'd be so like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But I realized I wanted more, both for myself and anybody I worked with. I wanted them to have more direct connection with the earth. So that came into my work more and more. And it made me realize I needed more times in nature that were more dedicated. And that the other thing it changed in my life was I realized there's an ordeal quality that has to be in a rite of passage, which is why when teenagers try initiating themselves unconsciously, look how they're always doing ordeals. They make up ordeals. See if you can drive at 100 miles an hour and don't get caught, right? But it's an unconscious ordeal that's not being validated by the community. They validate it for each other, but it misses something, right? So you have to go through an ordeal for a real deep rite of passage. So to go out alone, fasting and alone for 4 days and 4 nights with no shelter and no company, and, is a huge ordeal. And going through that, I realized I had way more strength than I knew, and that I could really get through a lot of things. So it really reaffirms your strength in who you are. And I've had women come on Vision Quest with me as a guide who have never even camped. And yet they feel called to do this, and they're so brave. And of course, they get a lot of support going out. They're very safe. Safety is the number one thing. And they might only do 3 days or whatever, but they come back in, and the light in their eyes and the strength in their being. Well, you've trained for events, athletic events. It's just like, I could get through a lot. I can do a lot. And I notice even with around here in Northern California, of course, we've had terrible wildfires and, had to evacuate. And I said to my husband, a lot of my neighbors were so terrified. And I said, wow, we have skills from that that we may need to use in our neighborhood to help our neighbors. There are skills from surviving something hard that we haven't been taught to draw on, and like everybody has been through hard things, and they could, if they were heard and mirrored correctly, that could actually become part of their offering and skill set. Like, wow, I've been through that. But if it's just like, oh, I got through that and that was awful, then people don't really get the gifts of what they've been through, that they could then draw on again. So that changed my life in that way. And then going into open heart surgery, I realized I had skills from the Vision Quest way. I could view it as an ordeal. I could cross the threshold. I could make it more of a ceremony. I could really mark the whole year after a major surgery as the whole return. What do I have to learn? What do I embody now in this new body? That I could bring all that to that, which helped enormously, because the hospital is not going to help you with the ceremony of your surgery. Right?
For sure.
I could write about that. I could help other people prepare for surgeries in a little more conscious, prepared way. So I think it helped me. How I approach things is how it changed my life.
Do you think that preparation also helped not only with the integration, but with the healing as well?
Yes. Yes, because for instance, just in that small category of surgery, all the research shows that if people going into surgery are better prepared, they've done relaxation tapes, they've done some imagery, they have support, the infection rates are lower, the recovery rates are faster. There's just more integration rather than going in terrified and alone, which many people sadly have to do. That's how it really changed my life. It's the way I approach things. I look at them more as that they have these steps, and that, yes, this will be an ordeal, but the purpose of an ordeal is to find out what the gift is down there in the dark, and then to bring it.
It's the hero's journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet the hero's journey often has been more of an upward trajectory. Parts of the hero's journey, as we were taught it, is you just go higher and higher and higher, rather than like sometimes you have to fall apart and kind of die. And then you find the gift and you come back. Sometimes we don't like that part of that hero's journey in our culture. We don't want to have to die first.
Right. But you can't carry, you got to let something go, right? And with that comes death, and with that comes grief.
Exactly. And in every rite of passage, what is the knowing in it? Again, cross-culturally, is there can be no rebirth without death. You can't move to the next stage without letting something go. That's very un-American. It's just not what we get schooled in. We feel like if we're going through grief and letting something go, we're doing something wrong. rather than something new is being born. We have to make the space for that. And I knew all that from being a therapist, but there's something about embodying it or enacting it or having other people in on it. It's the enactment. Like the soul really understands it when you enact something, rather than if you only think about it. You got to be able to feel it and do it, and then it moves.
Mm-hmm.
It really moves.
I'm curious about the process of a vision quest. You said something that really piqued my interest, which was before you did it, you had never been alone out in the woods for 4 days, and you said without shelter. So there isn't even a tent?
No, generally in most rites of passage, you go out unsheltered. Modern day rites of passage for us modern day Western psychological types. And where I trained is you take a tarp and you're trained beforehand all the different ways you can put the tarp up to keep you safe from sun or wind or rain so that you can create shelter for yourself. Now, as I get to be older, like I now actually take a tent for myself, and it doesn't matter. But I think when you're a bit younger, the tent can not make it quite as much of an ordeal because you can crawl in at night and zip that thing closed. And then you're a little bit separate. There's something about sleeping out on the ground under the open sky alone that, brings stuff up. It's big. It's vast.
So what was that first night like? And I asked this as somebody who was born a mile from the Lincoln Tunnel. Never, like no nature whatsoever. And as you're describing this, I think I can handle it now, but I can only imagine when I was younger, that would have terrified me.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, that a good guide knows that if your participants aren't a little bit scared to go out, there's something wrong. Because you're on the edge of something big. And of course, you better be a little scared. It's healthy. It's healthy because it keeps you alert. It keeps you oriented. I had backpacked and camped and stuff, but always with other people. So that first night alone, oh my goodness, my senses were on high alert. Like, what's that? What's that? What's that? Like every sound. I don't think I slept. And each night got successively easier each night. But yeah, your senses are very heightened. And fortunately, with doing this in a group and in a contained ceremonial way, the guides are in base camp. If any car came along, they would be on it. They're protecting you and they're protecting your space. So you don't have to be worried, that you're not going to be okay. But I've also fasted in the woods and in the desert, and it's very different because in the woods, there's all kinds of things that rattle around. A bird in the leaves can sound like a bear,
Right.
So it's scary. But if this is why the teachers who taught me said, people have to be prepared to know why they're doing this. They've got to know what their intention is. Because if you're clear why you're going to do this, why else would you do this crazy thing? If you know why you're doing it, you're going to be safer physically, psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally because you're oriented. It's like, I have to do this. If I'm going to declare this or get through this stage of my life or begin this new aspect.
And that was actually my next question. What brings a first timer to this type of experience?
Often it's a feeling stuck. Like I've tried a lot of things and I still don't know where I'm going in my life right now. Often it's I just finished school and I don't know what I'm going to do. Or sometimes it can be like marking a divorce or preparing for a marriage. Like I've had people come out who say, before I commit to partnership, I need to go out alone. For a while, it can be I'm turning 50 and I'm starting a whole new decade. It can be I've never actually marked my rite of passage into being an adult, and I'm 40 years old and I still feel like a teenager much of the time. I feel like an imposter. So I need to go out and mark my adulthood. Sometimes it's like, I'm turning 60. I think I better start thinking about what it might be to be an elder. And I'm going to see what that's like to, I'm going to go out and to mark my elderhood. And the guides help you hone your intention very specifically to like a statement or whatever. Or like with these veterans, it's like, I was never welcomed home properly, and I've been carrying around that war. And I need to be welcomed home, and I need to go out and do whatever I need to do to arrive back, no matter how many years it's been, and start a new chapter with what the gifts were out of that sorrow or out of that grief or out of that trauma. So usually people are going out because there's something hard, but not always. I mean, I know people who just actually now go out alone, do this with another friend as their spiritual retreat every year. But that's a pretty small group of people, I'd have to say.
Yeah. A few things come to mind. One, what a beautiful act of generosity to your potential partner to do that before committing, right? It sounds like it's this self-reflective thing, but it's like, no, I want to make sure that I'm ready for this.
Right.
The divorce rate would probably plummet if there was that level of intentionality behind crossing that threshold. And the other thing, when you were talking about the veterans, and I guess this applies to everybody, that just making that decision is really the first step of accepting whatever it is that may be coming their way. And so just committing to doing a vision quest feels like
it's huge. That is the first step. Actually, when you say yes is when it begins. Sometimes people start having different kinds of dreams. Stephen Foster and his wife Meredith Little were kind of the ones who brought this ancient ceremony, this pan-cultural ceremony, kind of to the modern day Western psychological types like us, right? And he would just say, why else would you do this crazy thing? I mean, you feel called. It's crazy to go do this. Put it out of your mind, he would say to people. Don't even think about it. He would kind of play the trickster and go the other direction. And he would have people commit like a year in advance, so it would work them. That doesn't happen in our culture so much anymore. But yeah, it's a gift to yourself and to your community to take time alone and go out like that. I have to say, when I did my first vision quest at 50, my husband was 59, and at 60, he did his first vision quest because he said, whatever happened out there, I want it.
Wow.
As I came back, I just felt so alive, just so alive and reawakened to myself because of just the non-interference of the modern world. So that inspired him to want to go. It's kind of funny. So you can be any age and it can be modified for you.
Yeah. So how do you keep that light that was ignited at 50? Because it's still sparkling in your eyes.
Yeah.
What is it that you do to keep that fire ignited?
Well, I do know sometimes when I need to get a day or a half day out on the land. And what I will do is call up another friend who knows this way and say, I need to do a walk. And I'm going to go on this day for this many hours. And can I call you afterwards? Or even to my husband. So I do set aside times once in a while to do that because it's completely different. And it freshens me. Sometimes I'll just go sit outside on my back porch and really sit with the night sky. Just look at the moon and the stars. It's just like reconnecting with nature. Sometimes I have to say, wait a minute, what's trying to die here? What do you need to let go of? What's no longer serves me? So those kind of questions all come out of that too. Or if I've just been through like a big experience, I might say to somebody, can I just tell you the story? Or suppose if somebody has had a big experience, I might say, why don't we sit down and light a candle and tell me the story? And I get energized by hearing it in that way too, where we take time for each other's stories rather than just chat about them. A story, as you know, and the work you do, a story is a gift. A story received is a gift, and a story well told is a gift to the receiver. So to have two people sit down and tell each other a real story feeds me, feeds both sides.
Mm. Well, Sarah, I can tell you that this conversation was a true gift. And we didn't know where this was going when we started. And I'm just blown away. I can't wait to listen to this again and to take some of these practices into my own life. It feels like the time is right. And you are so wise and so generous to share this with us. And I can't thank you enough for your time. This has been amazing.
Thank you. It's very enlivening for me to share it. As you know, I just love this, and I love what it gives people, this kind of stuff. So for anything in life. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Really
Enjoyed
fun.
it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.